live in the future now. My house makes me breakfast, but I don't know how. I live in a future town where the same old local politics are getting me down. Everything's nice and clean and stainless. In school they teach the kids that adolescence is painless. There's a drug for every symptom and two if you're nice. And we're so diverse, we're all alike as laboratory mice. We live in the future now, the future now. We live in the future now. We live in the future.
All right, everyone, welcome to Generation XYZ. I'm Jim Worthy, your Gen X voice, with Debra Godette, your millennial voice.
Hi, everyone.
And representing our Gen Z today, we've got Sam Bevins.
Howdy, howdy.
And Iyanna Tucker.
Hello, everyone.
They'll help keep us fresh and on point. We're not here to argue, change minds, or solve the world's problems. We just want to bring you perspectives from three generations as we all try to navigate the world we live in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said it right.
I try for the old guy here. What are we talking about today? What did we decide we're talking about? Voting?
I like that. Voting and politics. Let's get that out there.
All right. Well, obviously we got an election coming up.
Yes.
Between two guys. They're beyond my generation.
They're not quite boomers.
They are boomers.
They are?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought they were just past boomer.
No.
Oh,
nope.
wow.
I am technically speaking, I am on the upper edge of Gen X. I would almost be a late boomer. Boomers, I think, are 41 to not 41, 45 to 60, I think.
Okay.
And Gen X, the way I looked it up, Gen X is described as 1965, 1980, born in any of that year, that time frame. Gen Y is from roughly 1981, 1995, born in, and then Gen Z, roughly 1996 through 2005, more or less.
Babies.
Yes, the babies. And hopefully the Gen Z's not having babies yet, but some are probably getting close. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so we got the both candidates are boomers.
Wow.
They
That means we got to fall back on the VPs.
And yeah, I don't even know the age of Pence.
Pence is probably
That's a
like.
good question.
I'd imagine he looks like a boomer, but he probably isn't.
He's probably not. He's
60-ish.
Shoot. I don't know.
Oh.
I mean,
Google time.
we do have the power of the internet.
Hello, Siri.
But first off, all right, while I'm looking that up, we just need to make sure everybody is registered to vote, right?
Oh, of course.
Absolutely.
I'm big on that.
Yeah. Iyanna,
I mean, I don't know how you
vote?
can't be
Yes,
registered
you
to
have
vote
to
if you
vote
have
during this time.
anything.
See, here I go. I'm trying to type and talk at the same time, and I just can't do it.
Multitasking mess.
Well, the only thing I've been seeing on either Instagram or Facebook at all, whether Instagram gives it to me or someone else, is register to vote. I mean, Instagram and Facebook give you links at the top of your feed to go register to vote. Even, actually, Instagram told me whether or not I want to request a ballot to my house.
When did you register to vote?
Oh, I registered to vote back in 2018 when I turned 18.
Okay. What about you, Iyanna?
This year.
This year? For this election? I mean, this election pushed you to register?
Yes. Well, I don't know. I registered to vote one time for like council and senate. So is that the same thing?
Okay. So, well, yeah. No. So for the last election, last November?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. And
Yeah, I registered a long time ago when I first turned 18. Then I had to update my registration when my husband's military, so we moved. So I have to always update my registration. So I'm on it. I'm really big on politics. I think I may have told you that before, Jim, about I was working once for a political campaign. And so politics is like in my blood.
See, and I didn't even, this is the push. One, all right, back in the day, media was not as prevalent as, today. When I was growing up, we had like the three networks, ABC, CBS, NBC. And where I grew up, I was lucky on a cloudy day if I could get a staticky PBS station on my TV set. And so, it was talked about, but it wasn't, I don't remember the push to vote being as prevalent as it is today. But that's because everybody's got a phone, everybody's on a computer. There's always a screen present to push, register to vote. I didn't actually register to vote until I was in at least my mid to late 20s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was not interested. I mean, I was like, I was like a lot of people that go, I don't know that how much my vote really counts. It didn't feel that pressing. It didn't feel like a major choice between, between left and right. It didn't feel as polarizing as it does today to me when I was either in my late teens, early 20s, or even in my mid 30s.
So what was it that actually brought you around to, okay, now I want to register and I want to vote?
It ended up, I'm trying to remember if I registered to vote for the 96 election or if it wasn't until the 2000 election. Because I remember definitely voting in the 2000 election, and that was a big deal. That's when I first sort of became aware of the left and right as the parties, as I think we know them better now. Because I watched it sort of develop in the 90s with the right's push against Clinton, who back then to the right seemed very liberal. And Sam and I were talking about earlier that from a history perspective, Clinton is far from the most liberal president.
It's pretty funny, actually. If you sort of look back at the way he spoke, it's very, very different than what you would determine to be liberal today.
So when it came down to Gore and Bush in 2000, I was wanting to see a continuation of what had started with the Clinton administration, with the programs and the politics, because I watched the economy grow. I was right at that age, coming into my young adulthood, early 20s up through early 30s, of watching it go from stagnant with the end of the Reagan era into the Bush, the first era, into the Clinton era. And whoever you attribute the growth to, whatever you attribute the growth to, I watched the growth happen. I watched jobs start to become more available as I was out there seeking jobs. And I watched just so much happening then that I became aware then of movements that started happening against Clinton. The Republican Revolution that happened in, 94, when Newt Gingrich moved into the Speaker of the House of Representatives for the GOP. So by 2000, I was much more interested in voting and trying to help steer the direction of, the country in ways that I thought would help everybody and not be as focused on divisive issues. But it's all gone, everything has gone sideways since then, from both sides. Just more and more wedge issues just happen to get put in place. For what it's worth, I consider myself a moderate liberal. I consider myself on the left of the political spectrum, and somewhat moderate, and just as long as whatever programs help more people and as individuals, and not as much helping businesses, that's sort of the way I lean.
Okay. So I was kind of interested in, from the generational perspective, what issues matter the most this election for each of us?
Well, in terms of if I could just speak for my generation, I would imagine the whole Black Lives Matter and police brutality is a huge, huge motivator for people getting out there to vote. Just from what I've seen personally, especially from my peers posting, things like that.
Okay. All right. So that's what you'll be voting on. That's what
Yeah.
you're looking for.
What I'm
from a
mostly
candidate.
voting for is basically someone who's going to extend personal freedoms to those, including dismantling systemic. Ooh, can't say that word. Systemic racism inside of our own systems. People who dismantle the things that prevent people from having equal opportunity.
Okay.
Definitely agree with you, Sam. I definitely think that whatever comes or whatever vote, we need to have equal rights. Because honestly, in my perspective, I know it's a race out there, but I believe that we don't need to see race as a color. We just need to see everybody as human, and like we're all living here, that we all need to be together as one, not as this, she's that, and we all needs to have rights because we are all people. So why do they have to make it like that? But we need to have somebody in office that's going to make it known that we all needs to be one.
What about you, Debra? What's pushing you?
Well, social justice is, one of the main topics. I have to agree with my Gen Zers here on that. I also am watching closely how these candidates, what are your plans to dealing with COVID? I'm a mom. I think about how this is affecting our children. So I'm definitely interested in their approaches, their campaign's approach to how to deal with the pandemic. Of course, I'm also thinking about money. Who's not, right? Who's not? What are their plans to deal with the economy? And how are you going to help what I call the little people versus business, which is kind of touching into what you were talking about earlier, Jim. What do you think?
So it's amazing just what the past year to me has brought around in terms of my thinking. For all my adult life, I've considered myself pretty open-minded, and have growing up in a small town in Arkansas where I can easily see, I grew up with a lot of the folks that support Trump and very conservative values. And I saw a lot of stuff, and I know that if I was still there, it's just, that's what you live with. That's what it's embedded in you because that's just what you grow up with and what you know.
It's the norm.
Yeah, exactly. It's the norm. And as I got out of there, went to college, and then after college, into graduate school, every step of the way, and then into the professional world, every step of the way, I met more and more people and expanded my social circles and met more different types of people. And the older I got and the more people I met, the more I started respecting more and more different points of view because it breaks that the walls that you grew up in, they start to fall down because you see people that at one time you might have thought were different as, okay, the only thing really different is that they date somebody different than you, or they worship different than you, or they don't worship at all. But fundamentally, when you're standing there talking to them, or I do theater. That's been my thing. When you're working a show with them, you're all after the same thing. And, it's just, you appreciate people when you all have a common goal and you're all working together on this. We're not here to talk about each other's gender. We're not here to talk about each other's color. We're not here to argue about each other's ages. We're just talking from different points of view and different perspectives. So everybody goes, oh, wow, that's interesting. I never thought of it that way. But in the past year, so I thought of myself as quote unquote colorblind. That I appreciate, people, and that I was colorblind. And I've realized that's not the right way to phrase it, because I find interesting people interesting. And that is just that truly is colorblind, because that's just a personality thing. I find attractive people attractive, but that's sight related. So that is a color thing as well. And so it's not colorblind. It's that actually enhances. When I find somebody attractive, it's just part of them. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So yeah. I've had a lot of reckoning with myself with how to think about racism, biases, and equality and equity, which is another difference that I've learned about just in the past year. So, as I probably rambled way off the topic, but for this particular election and for Black Lives Matters, how it has affected anything that I've seen, I want everything. I want it to be inclusive, because that's what's happened every step in my life. Everything has become more inclusive. And if I don't like somebody, I don't like somebody, but it's not because of the color of their skin, mm-hmm. and it's not because they're religious or not religious. It is how they are as a person mm-hmm. to me and other people. So yeah, I like it. The more inclusive, the more that the government helps the people, the individuals, that's where my support goes. And that tends to be, for me, the left, the liberal, the Democrats right now.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to make. I think sort of branching off of that, it's so much easier to dislike an idea or to disagree with an idea than to understand why someone holds that idea. The whole idea of being colorblind. I think in society, that's a bad way to approach social issues, because it's a good way to live your life, in my opinion, to be colorblind. But it's a bad way to approach social issues, because then you'd say, oh, well, why would I try to change my institution? I don't think it's systemically racist. I don't think any of these. But then you have to understand why it's not quite the best idea to look at it that way. Then you'd be sort of also blinded to the idea that there is change that we can make. So it's a lot harder to understand why someone believes something than it is to dislike that belief.
Right.
And it's coming from a place of purely good spirits as well. That's the other hard thing to come to terms with the idea of colorblindness. Is it's something that we all wish we could be. We all wish we didn't care about skin color, but there are still people out there who do. Still institutions out there mm-hmm. that care about the color of your skin.
Yeah. And I have also heard people say they have an issue with the term colorblind because they feel like it erases some of their individuality or their cultural identity, should I say. I understand what they're saying. I think that people who say they're colorblind, it's coming from a good place. It's just not phrased how these individuals who don't appreciate the term in the way that it's just not phrased how they like it.
It's important to understand why they believe this. It's important to understand why someone's colorblind or considers themselves to be colorblind. Mm-hmm. I mean, I used to consider myself to be colorblind. I grew up in a very diverse area. I don't think I ever had any. The majority of my friends have either been African American or any other type of minority in the United States. And I always consider myself to be colorblind because, well, I just don't understand how I could be anything other than colorblind. And sort of it took a while for me to sort of realize what is going on behind it's took me a while to understand what's going on behind the veil, of what's going on behind, the institutions, what's really harming people, things like that. And it took me a really long time to realize that.
And that's why I say the people who consider themselves colorblind, they are coming from a good place.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So trying to think, should I start with the millennial or the Gen Zs? I'm going to start with the millennial, Debra. So, when I was growing up, watching TV and watching movies, entertainment, diversity wasn't a major thing. You had really you had white shows and you had black shows. You know what I'm saying? It was if they're shows like Good Times and The Jeffersons are the two that immediately come to mind, and then virtually every other show was white show with a black character. You know, and movies were sort of the same way. There were the mainstream movies, and you know, movies for African Americans were, you know, blaxploitation, or they were, you know, they seemed to be geared specifically. Well, they were marketed, they were perceived to be marketed for the black audience and not for everybody. And I've seen that change slowly, but I see differences now than what I saw back in the 70s and 80s, obviously. And you came of age in the early to mid 90s, right? So do you see things progressing from there, as in representation?
Oh, definitely. I would say one of the things that I can't remember which show or if it was a movie, but I remember seeing an interracial kiss on again, I don't know if it was on TV, and I remember looking around like, okay, you know, this is acceptable. It's, my parents didn't say anything, so, you know, it's, I could see that we were progressing in a direction that was more accepting of interracial couples and just, you know, different races in one environment and creating quality entertainment. So I would definitely say that we are progressing as far as, you know, interracial couples and just entertainment in general. What do you guys think?
Well, I think it would be hard to view this century as worse than last century or worse than the previous century. I mean, the progress that the entire world has made is pretty outstanding. It's not quite enough. We'll be really honest there. It's not quite enough. It's not really, we're not getting super, super close, but we are getting closer, and I think that's important to understand. But I think we also need to take into account something, I think it was Will Smith said, racism isn't getting worse, it's getting recorded. And all these things have been happening. People just haven't really noticed it quite yet. But I think to come from a place, say, you know, we had these awful institutions in America like slavery, and then we had civil rights movement. Now we have today, and obviously I'm skipping over so much, but we've made some incredible progress, and I think it is important to look back and realize how bad things really were, and to look forward and say how good things can be.
I agree with you. Well, I was just thinking about like how in today's world we have different colors and diversity, and how they try to put a different perspective on, like in certain TV shows they have like, I feel like it's like kind of mandatory that they put like 1, 2, or 3 types of races in one show now, so it can feel like somebody is being incorporated or somebody's not being left out. Or how like maybe African American would be like in this type of stereotype, or
So trying not to look at it from a historical perspective, you know, because you can read about history and be like, oh man, yeah, things were worse, and I mean, good Lord, 6-year-olds used to work in coal mines, you know. But as Gen Zers, you know, when you just browse whatever entertainment you're going to watch, whether it's, well, corporate entertainment, not like social media entertainment, not like TikTok or any of that stuff, but corporate entertainment, movies, TV, you know, do you feel like Iyanna, you're talking about seeing a bunch of different races, does it feel forced, or does it feel like it's a natural thing? You know, does that make sense what I'm asking? Do you feel like
sometime like sometimes you get it, but sometimes it feel like a little forced when they start adding all these other characters in there, and it's like, okay, they don't fit in that place, but I understand that you're trying to put everybody in there, but you know really they don't fit right there, because that's not their culture or their background. You're just putting them in there because you don't want everybody to feel left out. But I feel like it's a will or a way. If they don't fit right there, don't put them right there. But it's incorporation is great, but just don't want to feel forced. Like some type of shows don't feel forced as much as others. But even in the little kid shows, they have like all type of races in there, and then some you look at them, you be like, why they got that character looking like that? That race don't look like that. But I understand you put them in there, but we don't act like that. But I get it. I give you credit for it. And I guess it's good for, like, the little ones to understand that there is color. And because I believe that, like, for little ones, when you grow up, you really don't see color. Like, you can be African-American, you can be a Caucasian individual, and I've seen it for myself. I've seen a Caucasian individual at a babysitter, and she is an African-American lady, and she treats him as her son, and he doesn't see color. Like, even when I walked in there, he looked at me a little, like, and when I picked him up, he wasn't afraid. So it's basically like it's from where you're raised and who teaches you about that race or color. Yeah. So half of the time you don't really know. It's just like, okay, well, maybe I don't fit in right there. It's just a little different.
Yeah, I remember when I was in elementary school, I got out of social studies after we learned about Martin Luther King, and it literally blew my mind when I went to the cafeteria and realized, oh my God, my best friend is not white, or not even just white. It's just his skin color's different. I never really noticed that. As a little child, I was like, what is going on here? His skin is different than mine. And it's kind of funny how children really are colorblind. It just blew
really
my mind.
Just playing with different people and just
literally
learning.
blew my mind, yeah.
Rolling it back around to politics a little bit. Because both Debra and I, Debra, you can remember at least, 5 presidents prior to Trump?
Yeah, about four or five, yeah.
Obama, Bush,
yeah.
You remember Clinton?
Yeah.
Do you remember Bush the first?
No.
No? Okay. So 4 presidents prior to Trump. And really, the only president prior to Trump that you two can remember would have any recollection of is Barack Obama, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I have memories of Bush, but really the only memories that I can fully remember are him leaving office.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I have that memory as well.
Right. So there's not that history of seeing the differences, over and over.
I think only when you learn about it in history
exactly
class,
when
it's
you
not forced to your memory, unless
right.
you're like really into it.
Exactly. So when it comes to picking leaders, how much of it, since you don't have, when you hear a slogan like "Make America Great Again," since the America that you grew up in was, I'm assuming, fine with you. I mean, yeah, we all had individual hardships. We always do. But I mean, you hear "Make America Great Again" and you try to wrap your head around what
is happening.
What time period are we talking about?
That's what's so great. What do you want to take it back to?
Yeah, that's a great point, actually.
Yeah.
How does that affect y'all? And when they talk about the future, what is the for forward-looking campaign promises or slogans, or hey, build back better, I think is one of Biden's slogans. What does building better for the future? How does that? What type of things does that make you think about? You know what I'm saying? With the limited history of experience, not of knowledge, but of experience.
Yeah, for the "Make America Great Again" slogan, I always thought it was a really interesting slogan, just because it brings up the question, like you said, of when was America great, or what time period are we thinking about?
Right.
But I think I like some of the slogans that have come out of the past couple of years. I think I don't know if you guys remember Andrew Yang's slogan, "Math, Make America Think Harder," or I think that what it was, "Make America Think Hard, Make America Think Harder." I like these slogans that don't really bring up the questions like those. I just think it's sort of trying to. It just feels like they're not they're trying to hide something almost.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to make it a question.
Oh yeah,
It's trying to mess with your brain.
Yeah.
Like, it's trying to like,
hidden innuendos in there.
yeah,
there you
it's
go.
like it's like, okay, so make America great again. But then it's like the person is like, okay, so what is happening to make America great? Or when was it great? Or when was the biggest time of America when everything was fine? Like, what type of change that needs to be in America that you think you can bring to America?
That's a great point, actually. What exactly is going to make America great again? That's an even better point.
Well, and the key word in that is the again. What is the repetition? What are we trying to repeat?
It's funny that you mentioned that because I literally wrote down here history repeating itself. So yeah,
Yeah.
especially in terms of what you see happening now as far as racial clashing, like yeah, that's definitely interesting. Because it seems to me like it's true, like history happens in cycles, and it almost feels like we're about to turn back around to a cycle where, I hate to use this term, but it seems like there are some people that want to see like a race war.
Some kind of civil war.
Something.
Yeah, some type of war
Yeah.
is really coming.
Yeah. It feels that way, right? Feels like there are people that are trying to make that happen.
I like the saying, we learn from history that we don't learn from history. I always thought
I
was
like that.
really, I can't remember. I don't want to say Noam Chomsky said it, but it was someone pretty recent in the philosophical discussion said that. But I think that's a great, like you're saying, we learn, if you look back in history, it sort of starts to repeat itself. Mm-hmm. And I do think the consequence of not learning from history is its repetition. But there is some really scary stuff out there right now and pretty recently about the idea of some kind of race or civil war.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, yeah, I think it's closer to the surface than I can ever remember it. I grew up in the shadow of the 60s. My earliest memories, I remember hearing about refugees from Vietnam, but I don't really remember any news or anything about the Vietnam War specifically. My earliest political memories were during the Watergate hearings. And I just remember as a little kid getting upset because the afternoon cartoons weren't coming out because they showed Watergate. So where was I going with that? With learning from history, was that what we were talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or not really.
Or not really, exactly. But growing up in the shadow, and the Civil War, that I don't remember much of the civil rights movements. I don't remember, because all that happened right before I was coming of age to remember, be conscious of anything going on outside of my own little, playpen, basically. But the tensions that were there in the 80s during the Reagan administration that were coming to the forefront, especially with the crack epidemic and the quote unquote inner city problems, that, looking back, you think, they're getting smoothed out in the 90s under the Clinton administration. And then in the 2000s under the Bush administration, when everything was so focused on the Middle East, and that was the other that you forget about, or you're not as focused on any problems at home, and then you think you're making major steps forward with the election of Barack Obama. That was an amazing feat in and of itself.
Oh yeah.
But then after those 8 years, you go, how can we be where we are right now with as much unrest as we have? So that's looking back over as a middle-aged white man looking back on history. And so, yeah, I feel it's closer than I can ever remember feeling that sort of tension bubbling to the surface and bubbling over in some areas.
Mm-hmm.
It is pretty crazy how divisive Obama's election was.
Oh yeah.
I would have imagined looking back on that. I mean, I was only 8 years old, but I would have imagined looking back on it that would have been some kind of great uniter. The fact that it drove people apart so freakishly, the polarization of that event, kind of crazy to me.
I agree. I remember thinking it was like taking 10 steps forward, like
Yes.
for race relations. But then when he got out of office, it almost felt like we took 20 steps backwards, you know?
Yeah, 2016 just
Crazy.
doesn't look like
Anything
no,
like before.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, and it's so yeah. So with race relations, I mean, there's going to be a shift. I think it's inevitable at this point that there's going to be a shift. Something is going to happen, whether it is a peaceful or not. I think there's going to be a shift. Ultimately, will result in I'm praying for
Peaceful one.
yeah. Well, that it's a positive shift. You know what I'm saying? That it's not a not to put too literal a term on it, but not stepping on somebody's neck, one side or the other. You know what I'm saying? That is, you know, a use of force that is unprecedented in this country. I'm hoping that it is a transition that results in greater equality, greater equity, and just greater harmony.
Yes, I agree. And I think that a lot of that is going to fall. It's all going to depend on who we elect as president. We're going to need a president that's interested in uniting this country. What do you guys think?
I
Yeah,
agree.
absolutely.
I think we need somebody that's going to fight for our country and worry about the people that's in the country.
Well, regardless of who votes for you, you should be a fighter for them.
Exactly.
is true.
Someone
I
doesn't
definitely
even
agree.
If you're an American, you don't vote for who wins. The person who wins should still be your representative.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I agree.
Exactly. I have a feeling we'll come back and we'll talk about all this again after the election because it'll be very interesting to see what our individual and collective mood is.
Yeah, that will be pretty cool.
So I think this is definitely
that would be great.
worth revisiting.
You might be
And,
sick to the stomach, or you might be okay.
right? And we'll all be able to reflect and look forward, reflect from our own generational things and look forward for everything. But regardless, we don't know what the election holds right now. We all have our hopes, but thinking in the longer term, right now, and because I'll ask this question again when we come back and meet again, thinking in longer terms right now for yourself as an individual, for your generation that you're, you know, speaking for in this podcast, and for population in general, how, you know, you hopeful for the future, or you feel fearful?
Is it possible to be both? Because if that is a possibility, I definitely say I'm both.
Yeah, I
Hopeful.
definitely would check both too.
Yeah, I'm hopeful in the long term.
Yeah.
I don't know about short term. We'll see how the pandemic and how these protests play out.
Yes, because I think it's just a lot of things tying together at once that our mind just all over the place. We gotta try to wrap ourselves around it.
Right.
2020 is going to be an interesting chapter in the history books.
Oh, yeah. I wonder what
Do you
will it
think
say?
it is even going to exist?
I think it's going to be fun to see what December holds for us this year.
One day we'll all be old, like back in 2020.
Yeah,
When we used to
2020,
shake
oh
hands.
my God. We had to have virtual bands, you know?
Exactly. Well, we're at a little more than a half hour, so I think that's a good point to wrap it up.
Yeah.
We'll get together again and talk about more stuff. Appreciate you, Debra.
Thank you.
Sam,
There you
Iyanna.
go.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate y'all. And as we go along, we'll get more comfortable. And obviously, we're not scared to say anything in front of each other. So we'll keep on going with that until next time. Thank
talk.
y'all. This is Generation XYZ.
Yeah.
I live in the future now. My house makes me breakfast, but I don't know how. I live in a future town, but the same old local politics are getting me down. Everything's nice and clean and stainless. In school they teach the kids that adolescence is painless. There's a drug for every symptom, too, if you're nice. And we're so diverse, we're all alike as laboratory mice. I live in the future now, the future now. I married my future wife, but I had to take a